Five Nights at Freddy's is one of the most jam-packed game franchises when it comes to secrets, mysteries, and details. But did you know that many of these unique details are so impressive, they're actually mind-blowing? For example, the fact that it's inspired by elements from the real world is one of the most striking things about FNAF. This is the first detail of the franchise, and it's its very soul, because there's no way to talk about FNAF without talking about the animatronics. And these animatronics were clearly inspired by the same kind of big mascots from the real-life Chuck E. Cheese restaurants that were popular in the 70s. And look at that! The first restaurant in the FNAF timeline also takes place during that time. Another incredible detail is one that'll make you pause the video to laugh, and it's going to catch you off guard. I bet a channel subscription that this will surprise you. Deal? On the first night of the first game, did you know that if you put the camera on the Pirates Cove area, Foxy sings a song? It's a famous song. Check it out. I told you it was going to surprise you, didn't I? But jokes aside, this is the song Foxy keeps singing, and this only happens on night 1. So get your flashlights ready, subscribe to the channel, and let's dive into 15 mind-blowing FNAF details in another amazing zigzag video. One of the most useless Easter eggs, but also one of our favorites, is the fact that if you click Freddy's nose on several posters or dolls throughout FNAF 1 to 4, you hear this dumb honking sound. It's the kind of detail that, once you put it in one game, you have to put it in all of them, and you can be sure the fans are going to look for it. Scott Cawthon's original idea came from a recurring nightmare he had, and check this out. He dreamed that Bonnie tried to get him while he was sleeping, and for some reason, his room had no doors, and the only way to stop her from getting in was by keeping an eye on where she was in his house. He always woke up sweaty and gasping with his phone alarm going off. And tell me if that isn't literally the game's mechanics. In the game, you're doorless and have to keep opening and closing them to save power. You stop the animatronics by looking at them, and there's the phone guy each new day. Artists really are the sum of their experiences, right? Did you know that the creator of the games was completely broke before FNAF was released? Yeah, Scott was already a game dev before FNAF's success, but his games were really lame, and no one cared because they were kind of clunky. But not in a way where the clunkiness was part of the charm, you know? The good part is that he was able to use the look of his characters from the game Chipper and Sons as inspiration for the animatronics in FNAF, which came right after. One of the most satisfying and memorable moments in the entire franchise is when we discover the character called Mr. Consequences fishing at a lake. And there you can hear a distorted sound that, if you slow it down, you can clearly hear William Afton's screams for help. And the coolest part is that the most obvious thing you think when you hear it is exactly what happened. That sound is literally Scott Cawthon yelling into a fan. Do you know why the animatronics hunt you? In the first game, they have a very believable motivation, because it was before the whole revenge plot against Afton existed. Since we didn't even know that the purple guy had a name, the animatronics attack you because they think Mike is an endoskeleton without a suit. And then you're done for because they stuff you inside an empty animatronic. This explains what's happening in that opening scene of the movie, and why Freddy's eyes are popping out of his face when you die in the game. Quick, turn off the animatronics at the right moment. Just subscribe to the channel and hit the bell and you'll be safe. Very good. Let's keep going. This is the power of the gaming community. Seriously. At the beginning of the game's release, no one knew these games had a story. But as they kept coming out and the phone guy gave hints, people started investigating everything to discover not only the story, but the order of the events. And man, the way they found out when FNAF 1 takes place was insane. At the game's ending screen, we get this paycheck for Mike Schmidt. So far so good. Since Mike spends 5 days at the restaurant, it's assumed he worked during the week. But there was no way to know the year because it didn't show up on the check. Only that it was November 12th. But then to figure out the year, the community calculated inflation according to the years and discovered that in 1993, the minimum wage for this type of job was exactly what Mike got paid. And if you check the calendar for that year, November 12th fell on a Friday. I don't know who's crazier, Scott for doing this with such precision, or the fans who figured it out. This one Scott was very clever, Because on the job listing screen, we have that newspaper strip with a bunch of out-of-focus text written on it. Did you know that Scott actually wrote all of that? Yeah, but there's nothing useful there. It's literally just a bunch of random nonsense, like things saying, "You'll never survive the 5 nights," or giving tips about better and less dangerous jobs. Speaking of danger, today we know the animatronics' names by heart, right? Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy. But those weren't supposed to be their names. Did you know that? Those names were just affectionate nicknames Scott gave them to remember who was who, while he hadn't come up with better names yet. But then he ended up liking the names and kept them. Thank goodness, right? And we can tell that this technique worked for him, because this game had an extremely fast development, even for an indie game. I think especially for an indie game. FNAF was Scott's last attempt to work with games. If it didn't work, he would have given up thanks to the depression caused by the failure of Chipper & Sons. That's why FNAF was made in just 6 months, and then it fell into the hands of Markiplier, who made the whole world know about the game, and the rest is history. When they were in the early stages of the movie, Scott went himself to the FNAF Reddit to share the news and talked about several interesting ideas that were scrapped. And one of them was a script focused on Cassidy's story. She was one of Afton's victims who went unidentified for years. And Scott scrapped the idea because he felt the movie was more like a list of lore bullet points that only super hardcore fans would enjoy, and that there wasn't much of a story to support all that lore. And speaking of her, the internet came together to discover her identity in an insane way. And her identity wasn't even inside the game. Did you know that? In the book, The Security Logbook, we have several markings in red ink, canonically written by Mike, but we also have on several pages someone else writing in the book without Mike knowing. People started noticing that my name appeared written on several pages, and after a long treasure hunt, they discovered that the one writing in those books was Afton's lost victim, a girl named Cassidy, who was the girl possessing the golden Freddy suit. Cassidy is an extremely important character, and after everything that happened, I think it'd be awesome to have a movie just about her, don't you agree? So send us a hashtag Cassidy so we know. And the most important thing about Cassidy is that she is, out of all of William Afton's victims, the most vengeful spirit of all, who isn't satisfied with just killing her tormentor. No, my friend. She wants to make him suffer, and suffer forever. That's what the game UCN, Ultimate Custom Night, portrays. That bunch of animatronics with their various mechanics are Afton's victims, tormenting him forever. Yes, the player here is in the shoes of the serial killer himself. That's why the game is so hard. Remember his cries for help? It's because of this that it's happening. And he's trapped there at this exact moment. Now that's some heavy stuff, huh? Want the last mind-blowing detail that's literally happening right now? You've probably seen the trailer for the new game, right? The game called Tales of the Mimic is hype-worthy just by the name alone, since he's the new villain of this new game arc introduced at the end of the Security Breach DLC Ruin. But the twist is that this story will show the origins of the Mimic back in the 1970s, where the story of Henry and Afton began. Will Scott have the guts to pull off a retcon in this story, or even do a full reboot?